In the dead of an Alaska winter, a retired Navy SEAL fought his own battles in silence, loneliness, old wounds, and nights that felt far too long. Yet even with a heart weighed down by memories he never spoke of, he never turned away from anyone in need. So when a blinding snowstorm revealed a terrified little boy and an elderly grandmother lost in the cold, he didn't hesitate. He opened his door. He wrapped them in warmth. He offered safety, shelter, and the kind of compassion that only comes from a soul tempered by hardship. What he didn't know was that this simple act, this quiet choice to open his heart, was about to change his life in ways only God Himself could have arranged. Before we begin, share this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe so you never miss another story of faith, hope, and the miracles waiting in everyday life. The snowstorm over Anchorage. Winter winds clawed across Anchorage's outskirts, sharpening the night into something merciless. Elias Ward tightened the navy blue winter coat around his broad shoulders as he walked the dim neighborhood trail. At 40, he carried himself with the quiet steadiness of someone who had lived through far worse storms than the one gathering overhead. His face was rugged and sharply built, with a square jaw lined by neatly trimmed stubble, touched with silver at the temples. Deep brown eyes, warm in calm moments, had a piercing edge whenever old memories rose without warning. His left knee stiffened with every step, a battlefield injury, shrapnel, sand, and a night he never talked about. Sometimes it hurt more in winter, sometimes it reminded him of people he wished he had saved. The pain didn't slow him now. Nothing ever did when someone might need help. Behind him padded Bruno, his 5-year-old German shepherd. Bruno moved with disciplined grace, muscles rolling under a coat of black and tan fur. His ears stayed high, listening to the world even when the world seemed empty. Amber brown eyes scanned ahead with soldier-like focus. The dog was calm by nature, a trained service companion who wasted no bark unless it mattered. The black harness on his chest read in white letters, "Service dog, do not pet." Elias glanced upward. Snow was falling harder, thickening into curtains that blurred the modest house and flickering street lamps. He had planned just a short circuit around the block, enough for Bruno to settle for the night, but Anchorage weather changed fast. One minute the sky whispered, the next it tried to swallow the town whole. A gust slammed into him, bringing the metallic smell of deep winter. Bruno halted, his body stiffened, tail dropping to alert posture. "What is it?" Elias whispered, lowering his hand to the dog's neck. Bruno's head tilted toward the dark stretch of road leading toward the edge of the woods. Then came a sound, faint, fragile, trembling like a thread pulled thin, a child's cry. Elias felt something twist inside him, a tug he recognized too well. He had heard that sound in other places, villages abandoned under fire, rubble where homes once stood, the cry of someone too small to fight the world alone. Even after years of civilian life, those echoes had never left him. Without a word, he followed Bruno toward the noise. The wind thickened into stinging flurries that burned his cheeks. Snow swirled beneath streetlights like white ghosts rising from the ground. Then, through the storm's shifting veil, shapes appeared, 2 of them. The first was an elderly woman, thin and fragile, wrapped in a beige coat that offered little protection from the cold. Her hair, once silver and soft, now clung to her forehead in frozen strands. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the storm's glow. Her movements were hesitant, disoriented, as though each step came from nothing but instinct. Her eyes darted in every direction, confused, frightened, searching for something she couldn't name. The second was a small boy of about 6, clutching her sleeve with numb red fingers. He wore a puffy coat several sizes too big, the hood sagging over his tear-streaked face. His boots were soaked. His breathing came in quick, panicked gasps. Every few steps he stumbled under the weight of the storm, and the weight of protecting the only person he had left beside him. Elias slowed, instinctively assessing. The woman's pupils didn't focus, her steps didn't follow purpose. She murmured to herself, strings of names, half-formed memories, pleas to people who weren't there. Alzheimer's, not mild, not tonight. The boy tugged her forward, trying to guide her, but his small legs shook uncontrollably. He collapsed first, one knee dropping into the snow, then the other. A muffled sob cut through the wind. The woman swayed. Confusion clouded her eyes. She whispered a name. David? No. Thomas? And staggered sideways, almost falling onto him. Elias's heart thudded. He knew what cold like this could do in minutes. He knew how quickly exhaustion turned deadly. His hands curled into fists inside his gloves, not from anger, but urgency. He could feel the old instinct rising, the one he thought he had buried with his uniform. Bruno stepped forward, lowering his head, letting out one soft, deliberate bark. Just one. A signal, a warning, a plea. The storm swallowed the sound almost instantly. Elias drew a sharp breath. He quickened his pace, pushing through the knee-deep snow. The woman faltered, her body tilting at a dangerous angle. The boy's small shoulders trembled as he tried to lift his head to see through the blinding white. Another gust hit, and their silhouettes blurred. The boy slipped fully to the ground. The woman's legs buckled. Bruno barked softly again, tail rigid, ears locked forward. Elias broke into a run, sharp pain burning up his injured leg, breath tearing through the cold. Yet none of it mattered. But the blizzard thickened into a wall between them, stealing distance, stealing seconds. And for one suspended moment, frozen in the howl of the storm, no one knew whether he would reach them in time. The soldier finds 2 lives. Snow churned around Elias Ward like a living wall, but Bruno surged ahead, carving a dark path through the white. The German shepherd moved with sharp, purposeful strides, his breath rising in short bursts of steam. Elias followed, his left leg burning from the familiar ache of his old combat wound. The storm roared, yet he pushed through it with the stubborn resolve of a man who had trained himself never to stop when someone needed him. He caught sight of them where the road met the tree line, 2 figures, hunched and trembling beneath the violent sweep of snow. The boy was the first to move. He lifted his head with effort, revealing a pale, frightened face framed by a hood soaked through. His eyes, wide and shimmering, held the raw panic of a child trying to be brave far longer than his small body could manage. "Please," his voice cracked as he looked up at Elias. She doesn't remember me anymore." The words crumbled into sobs. Elias dropped to one knee beside him. The cold seared through his jeans, but he didn't notice. He placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder, small, shaking, and painfully cold. "Hey," he said softly, leaning close so the wind wouldn't steal his voice. "You're not alone now. I've got you." Bruno positioned himself in front of them, lowering his body to block the worst of the wind. Snow clung to his black and tan fur, but he stayed still, a solid wall of warmth. The boy's eyes focused on the dog for a brief second, awe flickering in the fear. Then the woman's body sagged sideways. Elias caught her before she fell completely. Up close, she looked even more fragile. Thin wrists, parchment-like skin, silver hair tangled with frost. Lines of exhaustion carved deep grooves around her eyes. Her mouth trembled as if trying to form words she no longer trusted. "Nora," the boy whispered, tugging her sleeve. "It's me. It's Logan." She looked at him, blinked, then pulled her hand back with a sharp gasp. "I don't know you," she murmured, voice tremulous and cracked. "My son, he should be here. He was just here." Logan let out a small wail, burying his face in his hands. The sound pierced Elias in a way he didn't expect. It was too familiar, too close to another night in another country, when he had found a child alone beside the rubble of a collapsed building. He remembered the same sound then, remembered the helplessness in the child's eyes, remembered the rage he felt at a world that let innocence shatter so easily. That night had shaped him. It had carved something permanent into his chest. Now, the past folded neatly into the present. "Listen to me," Elias said, shifting Nora's weight into his arms. She felt frighteningly light, as though the storm might carry her away if he let go. "We can't stay here. The road will disappear soon, and you two won't survive another hour in this cold." He wrapped his winter coat around both Nora and Logan. The fabric enveloped them like a small shield against the storm's bite. Bruno leaned close, pressing his warm flank against Logan to keep the boy upright. Elias adjusted his grip beneath Nora's shoulders. Though thin, she was still the weight of a full-grown adult, and his injured leg protested as he lifted her. Pain shot upward, but he swallowed it down. He'd carried heavier loads in worse conditions. He could do it again. "Stand up, kid," he urged. "Take my hand." Logan's small fingers curled into his glove. They were cold, stiff, barely moving. Elias tightened his hold. "Where?" Nora whispered. Her eyes darted in every direction, unfocused. "Where is my house? I need to go home. David, Thomas, someone was here." Her voice drifted off like smoke in the wind. "You're safe," Elias told her gently, though she no longer seemed to hear. I'm getting you somewhere warm. Bruno barked once, a low, controlled sound. He was scanning the darkness, tail rigid, sensing movement Elias couldn't see through the thickening white. The storm was worsening. Snow piled higher against Elias's boots. The trail back to his cabin was already vanishing under the fierce sweep of drifting flakes. He looked at Logan. The boy stared forward with glassy eyes. Tears clung to his lashes, freezing as they fell. He clutched Bruno's harness with one hand and Elias's sleeve with the other, torn between fear and determination. "Don't let her go," Logan whispered. "I won't," Elias answered, and he meant every syllable. He shifted Nora higher onto his back, bracing her weight across his shoulders. Logan pressed against his side. Bruno moved to the front, lowering his head against the wind, ready to break a path through whatever the blizzard tried to bury. Elias inhaled deeply, the cold burning his lungs. "Stay close," he said. "We need to move before the storm swallows the trail." Logan nodded. Bruno barked softly. Elias stepped forward into the storm, carrying a frightened child, a disoriented grandmother, and the weight of 2 new lives depending on him. The snow swallowed their shapes almost instantly. No one yet knew if they would make it back. The house of a wounded man. Snow clung to Elias Ward's coat as he pushed the door open with his shoulder, keeping Nora balanced against his back, and Logan pressed close to his side. The warm air of the small wooden cabin rushed out to meet the cold, carrying with it the scent of pinelings, old books, and something faintly metallic, like tools left drying near a heater. The place was modest, almost sparse, but clean. A stone fireplace glowed with orange light, filling the single-room home with the only true warmth for miles. Wooden shelves lined the far wall, cluttered with things Elias had carved by hand. An eagle mid-flight, a wolf with bared teeth, a tiny boat with sails etched in thin strokes. They were fragments of a quieter life he was still learning to accept. He gently lowered Nora onto the worn couch beneath the window. Up close, she looked even more fragile, her thin frame trembling uncontrollably, lips pale, eyes darting around as if the shadows held memories she could not grasp. Her skin had taken on a gray cast, a warning Elias recognized from combat med training. Fever, possibly dehydration, possibly worse after hours in the storm. Logan clung to Elias's sleeve, his small face pinched with fear. The boy's dark hair, matted with melting snow, curled against his forehead. His cheeks were flushed raw from the cold, and his breathing trembled as he tried to hold himself together. Bruno entered last, shaking snow off his thick coat. The German shepherd moved quietly through the cabin, nose lowered as he scanned the room. His ears twitched at every sound, the groan of settling wood, the snap of a burning log, always alert, always protecting. Elias crouched beside the old woman and pressed the back of his hand to her cheek. "She's too hot," he murmured. The boy swallowed hard. "She keeps saying she needs to find her son. She thinks he's somewhere out there." Elias nodded once, a short, focused motion. "She's confused because of the Alzheimer's. The storm made it worse, and the cold hit her hard. But we'll help her, I promise." He stood again, moving with quick, efficient steps. From a cabinet he pulled out a small metal box, its surface dented, its edges worn. Inside were the remnants of his old Navy SEAL field kit, sterile pads, a thermometer, a few fever reducers, and a roll of bandages. He kept it stocked out of habit, not loyalty to the past, but because some lessons stayed stitched into the bones. As he worked, Logan hovered near the couch like a trembling shadow. "Logan," Elias said gently, "I need you to stand closer to the fire. Your hands are turning blue." The boy hesitated, his gaze locked on Nora. What if she forgets again? Elias lowered himself to one knee so their eyes met. "Then we remind her, together, but staying warm helps us all." Logan nodded slowly and moved toward the fireplace. Bruno followed him, lying down beside the boy and resting his warm, heavy head on Logan's lap. The small gesture loosened something in the child. His shoulders dropped, and just for a moment, he allowed himself to lean into the dog's side. Elias wet a cloth with warm water and brushed it along Nora's forehead. She flinched at the touch. "David?" she whispered, the name cracking into nothing. "No, ma'am," Elias said softly. "You're safe. Logan is here." But her eyes drifted away again, closing tight as if fighting against the darkness behind her eyelids. Then, suddenly, she lurched upward, grabbing Elias's wrist in a surprisingly strong grip. "My son," she gasped. "I have to find him. I lost him. He was right there, right there." Elias steadied her with both hands. "You're inside now," he said. "It's warm. No one is lost here." Her breath hitched, her eyes unfocused, and as quickly as she had gripped him, she let go, sinking back into the couch as tears slipped down her wrinkled cheeks. Logan ran to her side, voice breaking. "Grandma, please don't go outside again. Please." Nora stared at him as if he were a stranger. "Sweet boy," she whispered. "You shouldn't be out in the cold alone." Elias felt something tighten in his chest, a hollow ache he knew from another life. He had been responsible for men who slipped in and out of consciousness, men who whispered names of brothers already gone. He had watched memory shatter under trauma, watched strong hands go limp, and he had carried guilt heavier than body armor when he couldn't pull someone back. Tonight, that ache returned. He pulled a blanket from the bedroom corner and wrapped it tight around Nora's shoulders. Her breathing steadied, though her eyes remained clouded. Hours passed like this, Nora drifting in and out of lucidity, sometimes calling for people Elias had never heard of. Logan crying quietly into Bruno's fur. Elias moving between the fireplace, the medical kit, and the couch with practiced calm. And Bruno never leaving his post near the door, guarding them against whatever waited beyond the storm. At one point, near midnight, Nora rose again, silent this time. She shuffled toward the front door with the slow, automatic steps of sleepwalkers. Her trembling hand reached for the latch. Elias caught her just in time. "No, ma'am," he whispered, holding her shoulders firmly. "You're safe. You're inside." She stared past him at the storm outside, as if hearing voices only she could understand. "Someone is waiting for me," she murmured. "No one who loves you would want you out in that cold," Elias said. Her eyes softened, not in recognition, but in exhaustion. She allowed him to guide her back. When she slept at last, Logan curled beside her, his small hand gripping her sleeve in silent fear she might disappear if he let go. Elias sat on the floor opposite them, leaning back against the wall. He rubbed his knee, feeling the familiar throbbing. Bruno came to rest beside him, pressing his solid weight against Elias's shoulder. In the quiet glow of the fire, Elias looked at the two strangers who had stumbled into his life. He had once carried soldiers through darker nights than this, but tonight felt different. Tonight, he wasn't just keeping them alive, he was keeping them together. Bruno lifted his head, ears twitching toward the storm outside. Elias whispered, "Stay ready, boy." The dog lowered his head again, but his eyes never closed. The storm raged, but inside this small cabin, a fragile calm held, just enough to last the night. Danger breaks through the storm. The storm had settled into a deep, guttural roar by the time the old wooden clock on Elias Ward's wall struck 4. The fire inside the stone hearth sputtered and snapped, its glow dimming under the constant draft sliding through cracks in the cabin's frame. Snow hammered the windows with relentless force, as though the night itself was trying to claw its way in. Elias sat on the floor beside the couch, his back against the wall, eyes drifting between the sleeping forms of Logan and Nora. Logan had curled into a tight ball beside his grandmother, wrapped in 2 blankets, cheeks blotched with exhaustion. Nora, thin and pale, lay motionless, her breathing shallow and uneven. Elias had been checking her fever every half hour. Each time, the heat of her skin climbed higher. Bruno lay near the door, front paws stretched out, head resting on them in a stiff, alert posture. His ears flicked at every shift of the storm. His dark coat shone faintly in the firelight, the tan fur on his legs trembling as the cabin quivered with each gust. Elias was rubbing his left knee, the aching one, when the world cracked. A deafening snap tore through the night, sharp enough to make the window panes shudder. Elias was on his feet instantly, instinct firing before thought. Logan jerked awake with a startled cry. Bruno leapt up, nails scraping across the wooden floor, barking once, a deep, serious sound that only came when the danger was real. Elias reached the window just in time to see the massive shadow falling. An ancient pine tree, one that had stood on the property long before he moved in, had split at its base. The storm hurled it sideways, and its heavy trunk crashed down mere inches from the cabin roof. Snow and splinters exploded across the yard in a violent spray. If the tree had leaned a sliver more to the right, the roof would have collapsed on all 3 of them. "Stay back," Elias commanded, pulling Logan into his arms. Nora stirred at the noise. Her eyes opened halfway, glazed and unfocused, before her body slumped forward. A soft whimper escaped her, like a child lost in a maze of memories she couldn't escape. "Grandma?" Logan's voice cracked. Before Elias could respond, Nora's eyes rolled back. Her thin arms went limp. Her forehead was burning, hotter than any fever he'd felt on her earlier. "She's crashing again," Elias muttered. The cabin shook under another blow of wind. The fire sputtered. Snow pushed its way under the doorframe in thin streams. The temperature was dropping fast. He knew what happened to elderly patients in extreme cold with a fever this high. Their bodies shut down. Their minds slipped further away. And Nora had already been wandering through a blur of fractured memories for hours. She didn't have time to wait out a storm that was only getting worse. He grabbed his old military medkit. The metal box clattered open, revealing antiseptic swabs, a small thermometer, and a dwindling number of fever-reducing pills. He placed one under Nora's tongue, holding her jaw gently until she swallowed. But it wasn't enough. If he didn't get her to proper medical care, she wouldn't make it through the morning. Bruno emitted a low growl and looked sharply at Elias, as if urging him to act. Elias rested one hand on the dog's head. "I know, boy." He stared at the storm raging outside his window. The snow was knee-height and rising. The wind was strong enough to drag down trees. His cabin sat nearly a mile from the nearest plowed road. There were no neighbors close enough to see them. No one would stumble onto his property by accident, and the storm wasn't showing any sign of breaking. "Logan," Elias said, crouching down to meet the boy's panicked eyes. "Listen to me. We're taking your grandmother to the clinic." Logan's lips trembled. His small hands clutched the blanket around Nora's shoulders. "But it's dark, and the storm." "I won't let anything happen to either of you," Elias said, voice firm, steady, the tone of a man who had once led frightened soldiers through worse nights. "But staying here is more dangerous now." He grabbed 3 thick coats from the wall hooks. One was his heavy-duty winter parka. The second was a navy jacket lined with fleece. The third was a quilted coat he'd kept since his father's passing years ago. He wrapped all 3 around Nora's frail body until she looked almost swallowed by fabric. Then he knelt and positioned her carefully against his back. Her weight sagged onto him, light yet anchored by desperation. His knee screamed as he stood, but he locked his jaw against the pain. Bruno moved to his side, ears erect, tail stiff, ready. "Stay close to me," Elias told Logan, reaching out one hand. Logan grabbed it with both of his tiny hands. Elias reached for Bruno's harness and clipped on the reflective guiding strap, a thick nylon connector meant for rough terrain. The dog straightened, muscles bunching beneath his fur, head tilted slightly upward as if ready to take command. The wind roared again, rattling the windows, demanding they stay inside. Elias stared into the storm, then pulled the door open. Freezing air slammed into them, carrying needles of ice and swirling waves of white. Snowflakes stung his face like shards of glass. His knee buckled for a second, but he caught himself. "We move now," he said through the wind, "one step at a time." Bruno pushed into the snow first, breaking a path. Logan clung to Elias's sleeve. Nora's breath fluttered weakly against his shoulder. The storm swallowed them whole the moment they stepped outside, and Elias kept moving, because stopping was no longer an option. Dawn and a new door. The automated doors of Midtown Medical Center slid open with a tired hiss as Elias Ward stumbled inside, snow clinging to his coat like a second skin. His breath came in harsh clouds, each exhale sounding more like a man wrestling with the last of his strength. On his back, wrapped in the 3 heavy coats, Nora hung limp, her face pale, lips nearly blue. Logan held tightly to Elias's sleeve, his small boots squeaking against the tiles, tears still clinging stubbornly to his lashes. The lobby lights were too bright after the storm's darkness. Nurses at the triage desk turned sharply at the sight of him. One of them, Nurse Helen Briggs, a woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a strict bun, hurried forward. Her face, lined with years of midnight shifts and too many emergencies, shifted instantly from professional focus to alarm. "Sir, put her here, quickly," she said, guiding him toward a rolling stretcher. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent her life in the chaos of emergency rooms. She was short, stocky, with warm brown skin and eyes fierce enough to silence most nonsense. But now those eyes softened the moment she saw Logan clinging to Elias. "Sweetheart, you're safe now, both of you." Elias lowered Nora onto the stretcher gently, steadying himself against the bed frame as pain shot up his injured knee. Helen called for backup, her voice echoing down the hall. 2 orderlies rushed in, a tall, broad-shouldered man named Evan, and a thin younger woman, Marcy, with freckles scattered across her cheeks like snowflakes. They whisked Nora toward the emergency wing as Helen stayed to check Logan and Elias. "She's been fevered since last night," Elias said hoarsely. "Severe confusion, weak pulse. She collapsed during the storm." Helen nodded, already halfway through her assessment of Logan. "You carried them through that blizzard?" she asked, eyes widening. Elias just shrugged, rubbing his stiff leg. "They needed help." Helen exhaled, something like respect flickering across her expression. "Well, let's make sure you're not frozen solid." But Elias shook his head. "Check on Nora first." Helen didn't argue. She simply placed a warm hand on his arm, a brief, grounding gesture, and hurried after the stretcher. Logan moved beside Elias, his small fingers curling into the hem of his coat. "Is Grandma going to be okay?" he whispered. Elias knelt despite the sharp protest in his knee. "We got her here. That gives her a fighting chance." Bruno, who had waited anxiously near the entrance, padded over and pressed his head under Logan's hand. The boy leaned into the dog, burying his trembling face into Bruno's fur. Minutes stretched into hours. The storm faded outside, replaced by a soft gray dawn. Light filtered through the windows like a hesitant truce after a long night of war. Elias stood beside the vending machines, sipping a paper cup of bitter coffee, his coat draped over a chair. His hair was still damp. Exhaustion pressed down on his bones, but he stayed alert, elbows resting on his knees, one hand on Bruno's collar. Around mid-morning, a doctor finally approached. Dr. Marcus Hollis, a man in his late 40s with sandy blonde hair and a trimmed beard peppered with gray, carried himself with calm authority. His rectangular glasses sat slightly crooked on his nose, giving him a softened, almost weary charm. His build was lean, the posture of someone who spent more time caring for others than himself. "You're the one who brought in Nora Porter?" Marcus asked. Elias stood. "Yes, how is she?" Marcus's expression shifted with relief. "She's stable, high fever, mild pneumonia, severe dehydration, but you got her here in time. Another hour out there." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Logan rushed forward. "Can I see her?" Marcus knelt to meet the boy's eyes, setting a gentle hand on his shoulder. "In a moment. She's waking up, and I think seeing you will help her more than anything." A door swung open at the far end of the hallway. A man hurried inside, breathless, coat still dusted with snow. He looked to be in his mid-40s, tall, fit, with chestnut hair cut short at the sides and a face toughened by years of heavy responsibility. His eyes, sharp green, scanned the lobby in frantic sweeps. "Logan!" he called. The boy whirled. "Dad!" Elias watched as father and son collided in a desperate embrace. The man, Andrew Porter, clutched Logan so tightly it seemed he feared the boy might disappear if he loosened his grip. His voice broke as he kissed the top of Logan's head. "I thought I lost you, both of you." Dr. Hollis stepped forward. "Mr. Porter, your mother is awake. She's asking for Logan." Andrew's face crumpled with relief. "Thank God. Thank God." Then he turned to Elias. The moment their eyes met, understanding passed between them. One father recognizing the weight another man carried. One soldier recognizing another kind of courage. "You carried my mother through that storm?" Andrew asked, voice thick. "I just did what anyone should," Elias replied. Andrew shook his head. "No, most people wouldn't. You saved them." For the first time in a long while, Elias didn't deflect the praise. He simply dipped his head in acknowledgement. Hours later, after Nora had fully woken and Logan had crawled into bed beside her, the Porters gathered around Elias and Bruno in the waiting area. Nora, still pale, her silver hair brushed neatly by a nurse, held Elias's hand. "You brought me home," she whispered, touching his face lightly with her trembling fingers. "Thank you." Over the next days, the family visited him often, bringing warm meals, extra firewood, and quiet company. Logan grew, particularly attached to Bruno, spending afternoons throwing soft toys for the dog, while Elias repaired the broken fence outside. And for the first time in many winters, Elias felt something warm settle in his chest, a sense that the small cabin he'd lived in alone for years no longer echoed with emptiness. Sometimes a storm didn't destroy, sometimes it opened a door, and sometimes that door led someone home. Some people say miracles are rare, but sometimes a miracle is simply a door opening in the middle of a storm, a stranger choosing kindness, a child holding on to hope, a life being guided, quietly, gently, by a hand greater than our own. On that frozen night in Anchorage, nothing sparkled, no choir sang, no bright star lit the sky. Yet Grace was there, steady as a heartbeat, carrying 3 lives safely through the snow. And maybe that is how God works most days, not with thunder, but with small moments of courage that change everything. As you go through your own daily storms, may you look for the gentle signs He places on your path, and may you remember that even the smallest act of compassion can become someone else's answered prayer. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a reminder that God still moves in quiet ways. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, so each new day brings you another story of hope, healing, and the quiet blessings that surround us all. May God bless you and your family, today and always.